What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So, welcome to set 6. I mean, I guess we are a little bit ahead of schedule, and let's say something, I don't know, if we hit 1,000 views on this video, which is very easy for you guys to do because you're amazing, and we'll say 50 likes, which again, very easy to do because you guys have been so amazing. One of the lucky commenters down below will get a... Can you even see the whole thing? We did a Stitch Playmat. And, yep, got our little thingy on the bottom. Little lore numbers around the edge. Not available for purchase, by the way, because I didn't do the artwork, so I'm not going to sell off someone else's stuff. We just added the little zones to it and called it a day. But anyway, comment down below if you would like to try to win a playmat. But today, we're going to talk about Hyper Aggro going into set 6. So, what are some cards that might be really good moving forward? I think some cards to at least consider that probably don't make the cut end up being, well, first and foremost is the 1-drop in Amethyst, and that would be Diablo Obedient Raven. There we go. So, why do I think it's worth it for discussion? How many times are we going to say that? Well, when this character is banished, you may draw a card. So, at the end of the day, what you have Chernobog's followers. You in this character quest, you can banish it to draw a card. You have Magic Broom. When you play another character, you can banish this card to draw another card. So in that same vein, Diablo is a card that you can play, and you can start questing with it, and on the chance that it gets banished, it replaces itself by drawing a card. So I think it kind of fits in with Broom and Chernobog, but for me right now at least, it's going to go into that category of doesn't make the list, but maybe it's one of those cards that you try out or that someone ends up teching in as we move forward and go on. I'm going to skip off on another 1-drop. We got one more though to talk about quick. Good job. So, Inkable, 1 cost, and chosen character gets +1 this turn. I think that this deck has enough cards already that give you the 1 passive lore. You have your goat. You can bounce your goat. You have bosses on a roll. There's Spellbook if you want to go that route. There's the new White Rose. There's so many options you have already to get that just instant 1 lore that putting this card in, I just feel like isn't going to be the greatest because you need another character on board to actually get the value out of it. So top decking when you're just trying to close out the game, it's actually a really bad top deck on its own. So for that reason, I don't think that this card should be in the final list. But again, one of those cards that's probably going to see some testing and theorizing and see what happens. We have a 2-drop card then in Lilo, Zombie Lilo as it's been coined. The Escape Artist, 2 cost, 1/2, Inkable, quest for 2. All good things in a Hyper Aggro deck. At the start of your turn, if this card's in your discard, you may play her. She enters play exerted. So keep in mind, she enters play exerted from your discard, so you can't quest with her that same turn. But it forces your opponent to have that recursive answer, and you know, sometimes you might fall too far behind where it's not going to matter. But at the same time, sometimes they might not be able to answer the cards that you're playing and to answer her coming back. So it just compiles and builds up. And it's a free card from your discard. You don't have to pay for it. Once she hits your discard, she just comes back every single turn. And it's just pecking 1 damage away at your opponent, essentially, too. So I think that she's really, really strong. And for that reason, she probably, hint, hint, will make it into my final list for sure. Testing this card I think is very, very strong. It's a super rare. We'll see where the price point ends up, but I really, really do like this Lilo card. Moving into another card that I do really, really like, we're going to stay in the amber color. Tiana, Restaurant Owner. This 1/4 uninkable card, questing for 2. So what essentially she does is whenever a character of yours is challenged while this character is exerted. So you want to get her down, get her exerted, right? And then when your opponent tries to challenge, their challenging character loses 3 strength or they pay 3 ink. So essentially you make them decide between can they take out, especially in your early threats too, like this would be what, turn 4. Your opponent had 3 turns it'd be your opponent's fourth turn no matter what, fourth or fifth turn. So like something like a Maui, I guess, would be able to at least take out your bodyguard because they would have 6 strength. They'd have to pay 3 ink to be able to do it, but at the same time on turn 5, Maui comes down on turn 5, so they really don't have that 3 ink. They would have to have something from the turn prior, like a goat or a fox, but it has 4 strength and it's going to go down to 1 strength. So all of a sudden their characters aren't having that strength that they need to take out your bodyguards until like turn 6 plus, which means that it just really helps this deck out a lot because either they can't challenge your characters or they have to use up their ink just to be able to not lose their strength to be able to challenge your characters, which means they're not developing their board any further. And for that reason, I think that Tiana is just absolutely insane in this deck. I think she's crazy strong. Probably one of my favorite cards in the new set. I think that she is just absolutely broken. Being uninkable obviously is going to be one of those things that you have to make concessions for, being in a deck that already has a high-ish uninkable count, but I don't think that it should just necessarily dismiss her. So now we got a couple other 3-drops, and this one is going to be one that I want to test both of them, and I'm not sure if either of them make the list. Magic Carpet was just in that last 12 cards that were revealed, and it has 3 willpower and quest for 3, and it's inkable. So it's a turn slower than Pinocchio, but it is inkable and has 2 more willpower. To me, that's huge. You top deck this card, it's got 3 willpower, it quests for 3. I like both those aspects. You get it out with bodyguards. There's a lot I like about this card. Doesn't inherently do anything though on its own, so I get it, but I think this card is worth testing, and I definitely think it's going to find its way into some topping lists, as well as the White Rose, the Jewel of the Garden. So essentially it's GOAT, but it's only on play, it's not on leave. My biggest thing here is you should be playing 4 goats if you're playing White Rose already. I'd play 4 goats first. And I would borderline say you should at least be playing Snake to bounce your goats if you're going to play the White Rose. You don't necessarily have to, because it's still just on play. And Snake's not going to be like an on play effect unless you have goat already on board, because then you play your Snake, bounce your goat, get it that way. But I personally like bosses on a roll a lot too, which is another way to just gain that instant 1 lore. So I don't think this will make its way into my final list, but I think that it's a card that should at least be considered and tested, and would not surprise me at all to see some people playing it when all is said and done. So that kind of gets us through our early cards. Are there any later game cards? Because, well, typically Hyper Aggro is an early deck, right? What does Hyper Aggro tend to struggle with? It tends to struggle with resources. You run out of resources. You burn your hand. You're playing your characters. Like, if they break your board, you run out of resources. And I think we get a card that actually helps out with that a lot, and that would be Yzma, the Conniving Chemist. So 4 cost, 3/3, quest for 2. I already like Dolores Madrigal, who has this exact same stat line, and if your opponent is an exerted character on play, she gets to draw you a card. So I do like her a lot, but Yzma's pretty crazy too. She doesn't have an on play effect, but if you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand, which by turn 5 a lot of the time you will, you can just, if you don't need the 2 lore from her, you need the cards really bad, you can exert her and draw 3 cards, or up to 3 cards. And I feel like that's just really, really strong. Like, it truly answers a huge need that Hyper Aggro has. And on that off chance, she quests for 2. So if you don't need the cards, you have enough cards, you don't want to exert her to draw 1. I would rather get the 2 lore most of the time. So just the fact that she has that pivot option play, I think that Yzma is really, really strong. And between Yzma and Tiana, like, not just for, well, especially for this deck, but just in general, overall, I think those are 2 of the best cards in this entire set. There's a lot of other spicy things. I got lots of decks planned for you guys. This just happens to be the first one, but I really, really like Yzma. And one more character to talk about. One more. Simba. I did it in my card review, 5 cost, uninkable, 4/4, but he's a shift 3. And why would you play Simba? He quests for 2, but there's so much better cards. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready your other characters. So essentially, you get to ready your board. That's pretty good. You get to quest with your whole board, and unless they have something like a beat prep, grab your swords, it's going to be effective. Something to just mass deal damage across your board under the sea, you're probably in a really good spot. So I think he's worth testing, and I think he's going to see his play into some, like as a 2-of. I don't think anything more than a 2/2 is more than enough, especially being uninkable, because you have so many low-cost uninkable cards. But the fact that there's a 2-cost Simba bodyguard makes this card actually playable. If there wasn't for the bodyguard, I would not play this card. I would not even consider it. But the fact that you're probably already playing the bodyguard Simba means that shifting is actually not a terrible idea. So you get out a few characters. You have your Piglet, you have Daisy, obviously your Simba, and let's just call that. That's all you have out, right? The 3. You quest for 2, you quest for 3, that's 5. You shift your Simba, you quest for 6, 7, and then your Piglet and your Daisy get readied. So you just quested for 7 just like that. You probably already quested for a couple because of just the way the game's already gone out. And assuming you can play a character next turn, if they take out your Simba, which he's a 4/4, so it's not like he's easy to take out, then you're questing for another 5 at a minimum for a 12-point swing in your first 4 turns. Like, that's, again, and you're already going to have, what would it be, depending how you played it out, if you went Daisy, then Daisy Piglet into a Simba, you could already potentially, on top of having that 12, it would have had 1, 2, plus another 5, so you could have already had 7, so you could be pushing 19 by turn 4 very, very easily with like one drop Piglet Simba shift Simba play line. So I mean, there's some good there, right? Like, I would not sleep on it whatsoever. Then there is one more new card I did want to talk about, and that is the 100-Acre Island, Pooh's Home. So it's a location, 1 drop, 5 willpower, 1 cost to move here, and during your opponent's turn, whenever a character is banished while here, you get to gain a lore, and that just sounds absolutely broken, right? Kind of. It's 1 and it costs 1 to move there, which makes it actually pretty intriguing. You come down with this on like turn 4, and then you can move your 3 characters here, and now all of a sudden if they try to get rid of those 3 characters, you're going to be gaining lore for it. So that just feels really, really strong. But it's only got 5 willpower. And I'm like, okay, so maybe it's not that great because they're just going to kill it so fast it's not going to matter. But then I'm like, wait a second. If they have to throw 2 or 3 characters into this to kill it, that's an entire turn that all your characters survive because they're attacking the 100-Acre Island instead. So I do actually think that this card is pretty good, and it's 100% going to see some play. But would I play it? I was already being a pretty big advocate instead of Rapunzel's Tower. This card is so good. I don't know why it doesn't see more play in these lists. The other thing that I had mentioned over the last few weeks was Bosses on a Roll paired with Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, and that actually started to see more play as the format's been kind of closing out, so that's pretty cool. Not saying that they saw the videos or anything. There's lots of great players out there. They probably just connected the dots as well. But just the way those cards synergize, I'm like, why aren't more Amethyst Aggro players playing this stuff? And then when it comes to Amber, I'm like, it only costs 1 to move here. It's got 8 willpower. Like, you get your bodyguard here, and all of a sudden they have to try and take out your 2/3 bodyguard, which is now a 2/6. Or you get your Daisy here. Now your Daisy's got 7 willpower. You get your Lilos or your Maleficents here, and all of a sudden now they're 1/4 bodies. Like, just that is it's so strong because it helps against. We're in a steel meta, and it helps so good against it. It's not going to help versus things like Brawl versus the attack-based removal. It's not going to help versus like a Be Prepared. It's not going to help versus Under the Sea. So based on your local meta, you might want to change around which location to play. I think both locations are incredible, and you should play 3 of one of them. Library, no. Queen's Castle, weird. But no, I'm actually saying not to play that card. I think between these 2 locations, you should be playing one of them at 3. Keeping in mind, Under the Sea with the 100-acre island does not work because they're not being banished. They're going back into your deck. So do keep that in mind, that Under the Sea kind of gets around both of them pretty easily, just like it gets around the library really easily too. Another thing I think players should consider playing in this deck it used to be a big thing, and it's kind of faded off and seen less play now. And I don't think you should sleep on Cinderella. And I say that because how we already mentioned bosses on a roll, but we're playing friends on the other side, and you're playing bosses on a roll. And if you can establish your Cinderella and start singing these songs early in the game as a hyper aggro player, and you start gaining that advantage that quick, and you're building your board presence and questing that quick, it gets very difficult for your opponent. And bosses on a roll, like we mentioned, pairs up so nice because you get to look at top 5 with your gathering knowledge and wisdom to be able to close out your games, get to the cards you need, get to your finishers, your goats, your gathering knowledge and wisdom off your bosses on a roll, which is already going to get you a lore too. And if you hit a bunch of stuff you don't need or don't want, you just bury it all to the bottom of your deck. So you're sitting in a pretty good spot because of that, and I think that it's a strong play line, and we'll see how everything works out moving forward. So let's go ahead then and jump on into the deck list. So back after a quick water break, but here we are with the deck list. We see the overall curve peaks out at 4. Try to ignore the total budget right now because there are pre-sale cards in here. There's the new set and the prices aren't stabilized. Don't pay pre-sale prices. It's not very often you get a good deal. Once in a while you can find a steal on a card, and if you know, you know. But a lot of the time, don't do it. A lot of the time you get burned on it unless you really, really need it. We are playing 18 uninkable cards. We're playing 14 1-drops. So just the 2 Cinderellas, because you're not really banking on her. You don't necessarily want her turn 1. It's just an inkable option that it's not a bad pivot play. You could also, like I say, play Diablo, play Chernobog, play Broom. There's lots of options you can throw in here, and some lists actually load up and play a lot more 1-drops. I just find sometimes you get too greedy with that, and that's part of burning yourself out of resources. So I don't necessarily like to be dropping 3 1-drops on turn 3 on turn 4. Sometimes I think it actually ends up hurting you more than helping you. But then we have the Trinity with the Daisy, the Lilo, the Maleficent. There are 1-drops. This is why we're hyper aggressive. We have 12 1-drops that quest for 2. We moved down into our 2s. I got 3 Lilos. Like I said, I really like this card because it forces your opponent to have that answer. And yes, if you're in a super simplified game state, they're going to be able to answer it. Boom, boom, boom. But at the same time, as you're playing more and more cards, it becomes harder for them to deal with it because you're playing cards, you're drawing off your deck, and you're getting a free card. And let's say you get 2 or 3 of these even into your discard, and all of a sudden you're getting 2 or 3 of them back every single turn. And it can be very difficult for your opponent and help you close out those longer games because you don't want to get into a longer game. But Lilo is a card that just helps you out if you do happen to get there. 4 Piglets, 4 Simbas, 4 Donalds. Like, this is part of our 10... Or no, I was going to play 2 Baloos. Just the 8 Bodyguards. And I did that because of Tiana. So again, it came down to... I was like, Baloo or Tiana? And I was going to do a 2-2 split. I like that Baloo gives you the 2 lore. But at the same time, I think, and I want to test it. I'm not saying Baloo won't make his way back in. I think that Tiana's going to lead to more lore in the length of the game simply because of it puts your opponent in that predicament. Do I challenge and take this out by paying my ink? And it's like turn 4, so you're paying 3 ink just to be able to challenge one character, and then another character tries to challenge. Well, they can't, because they're going to lose 3 strength. So it just makes it really, really difficult on your opponent that way, especially when you get down bodyguards before your Tiana. So they can't even take out your Tiana. They have to go after your bodyguards. Obviously, like I said, there's things like Brawl that's going to be an early answer. We're going to see Sisu Daring Visitor, I think, is going to be a lot more popular this set. I think watch out for those, obviously. Maybe we make a princess, like an Aurora Princess aggro and give Tiana ward. That could be really strong too. We'll see with some other deck ideas, but I felt that Tiana was just overall better than Baloo. And again, I could be wrong on that, and this is just a preliminary, I want to test out list, but we'll see how that ends up going. 2 Magic Carpets just as a game closer. I did put 2 Dolores. I kept her in there. I took out, I don't know, for those coming back to the channel, I used to be on 4 Dolores and 2 Amethyst Chromacon kind of as a little draw package. So I took out the 2 Chromacons and the 2 Dolores for my 4 Yzmas, just fitting a similar role. I don't like giving my opponent cards with Chromacon. I don't like the turn off it takes to play the item. I've always been pretty critical of that card, even though I know it gets played a ton in the list that have done good. So I'm not going to say you can't play Amethyst Chromacon. I'm just saying that me personally, I'm not a big fan of the card, and I'd rather play things like Dolores, like Yzma, to accomplish what I'm going for with my draw engine. Like I said, the white rose ends up not making it. We do play a few Befuddles just as a way to help slow our opponent down. We're playing the 8 Bodyguards, the 3 Befuddles, the 4 Tianas. I feel like that's pretty good. Just the 2 Gathering Knowledge and Wisdoms. Trying to keep our uninkable count semi-manageable. Then you have your bosses on a roll, which pairs up with it so nice, and your 4 friends on the other side. And again, I'm on Rapunzel's Tower. Early in the format, I probably will put the 100 Acre Island in here because I want to test it and I want to see. But I truly think that Rapunzel's Tower is just the overall better card to be played. And I think that Hyper Aggro is in a really strong spot to continue being a really good tier 2 deck. I've said it a few times. I don't know if a Hyper Aggro deck can be tier 1. I really don't think it can because you're relying on matchups. A little RNG, not losing to yourself. Like, I think the deck can do amazing things, and I think it can win major events. I don't think it can win and top at a high conversion rate. Big part of that also being that the representation isn't going to be there usually with these style of decks. But yeah, overall, I think that it's an incredibly strong deck. Absolutely one of the best tier 2 decks. I'm really, really excited for this deck moving forward, and I probably will end up picking it up and playing it. But yeah, it's looking good to be a Amber Amethyst player moving into set 6. Let me know down below, what other decks would you like to see? I have a few more planned, but we got what? A lot of days before release, 15th, so 9 more days before release. Maybe we do 9 more decks, so 10 decks in 10 days before release. Actually, we have an updated tier list, so 9 decks in 10 days doesn't sound quite as cool. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below.